It's pretty common for most of us, especially among Christians, to think about priorities, to think about and even challenging ourselves and others to get our priorities straight. How many of you have ever felt like your priorities were kind of out of whack? Anybody? Have you ever found yourself there? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It's actually, if you think about your priorities, normally if you're thinking about them, it's because they're wrong. It's because they're wrong, right? Like if they were right, you wouldn't even be bothering to spend any energy on them. Up until the early 1900s, priority was never really used in the plural. It was always just used in the singular. There was only priority. There wasn't priorities. And really, if you think about it, that's really the only way that the word makes sense. You can only have one priority. But, you know, we're Americans, right? We can have more of everything. So we can have more than one priority. And we have to get them in the right order, right? We have to make sure that we have them right. It actually, we might say something like this. I want to keep God first, family second, whatever, third, work third. And then, but none of us just have God, family, and work, right? We've got all of this other stuff. And so everything's got to get in the right order. And it sounds good, but I believe there's a problem with it. And one is that these lists imply that to keep our priorities straight, that we have to devote the proper amount of time and energy and money to each thing on the list. That's the only way that it makes sense to me. So if God is first on your list, then God should get the biggest amount of your time, energy, money, talents, all that stuff, right? That's really the only way it would make sense. So then you have to sit down and you have to go, okay, I've got 24 hours in a day. I've got to divide up my time among my priorities. And you realize really quickly that's not going. Is it even practical? Does God expect us to say, okay, God is my number one priority, so I'm going to give him the biggest amount of hours just to him? Nothing else. It's just me and the Bible and prayer, and I'm going to do that for maybe 10 or 12 hours a day. Some of you think, that sounds amazing. And it does. But your wife, so you're going to have to give up something, right? You have to say no to a lot of things if you're going to give 10 to 12 hours a day. And again, I'm not discounting specific time alone with God, but what I'm saying is if we're going to give God the biggest amount of our time, energy, and money, just let me ask you a question. How's that working out for you? Is that working out for you? And so what we do is we start to compartmentalize our life. And we've got to chop and divide everything up. And that mentality of a priority list, it leads to this compartmentalized life where we're trying to give the right amount of time, talent, treasure, whatever term you want to use, and we usually fail miserably. And how do we even know if we're being really successful at that? How do we know? Because you might think, well, life seems to be going pretty good, so I must have my priorities straight. But maybe you're like me, and in the back of my mind, there's something haunting back there. And go, yeah, but maybe my life is pretty good, but what if it could be better? Maybe I need to rearrange it again. Maybe I need to get everything right. And I believe what happens is that we end up living this life where we constantly feel somewhat out of balance. And we're constantly trying to juggle things and get everything into the right order to make sure that we're giving God and our wife and our family and our work and everything the right amount. So if we're trying to do that, just, you have to ask yourself, where does Jesus fit into your schedule? Where does he fit into your bank account and your life? Well, that's easy, Carrie. That's right now. That's why I'm here. You got an hour a week. This is my Jesus time. I'm going to come in and get me some Jesus for an hour on Sunday mornings. But if God's first, is an hour on Sunday morning enough? No, it's not. Again, it's this thing that we get into. So what I want us to do is look at God's word because I think it shows us something different. It shows us a better way. Colossians 1, starting in verse 15, says this. He, speaking of Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For everything was created by him in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile everything to himself, whether things on the earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. In the beginning of everything that we see and everything that we know, there was Jesus. He came to this earth as the visible image. The book of Hebrews says he was the express image, or the exact image. Not a photocopy, not a close proximity. He was the fullness of God. And in the beginning, there was him. He created everything. He was the creator God. That was Jesus. That was part of his task. There in the beginning, it was Jesus. He goes before everything. He comes behind everything. The book of Revelation, chapter 22:13 says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Jesus is before and he is at the end. Psalm 139, starting in verse 7, says, where can I go to escape your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed down in Sheol or hell, you're there. If I live at the eastern horizon or settle at the western limits, even there your hand will lead me, your right hand will hold on to me. And if I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night shines like the day. The darkness and the light are alike to you. This is Jesus. He is before and after. He is in front and behind. He is above and below. He is to the east and he is to the west. He's everywhere. And in the beginning, he's the one who made everything. But that's not all. Colossians 1 says this in verse 17. He is before all things, and by him all things hold together. Jesus is the one holding everything together. Now, I'm not a scientist. Not by any stretch of the imagination am I a scientist. I think back to my high school chemistry class, and there was a friend of mine. He was a foreign exchange student from the Philippines, and our favorite thing to ask our teacher every day when we walked into chemistry was, could we blow up the lab today? That was the extent. I wanted to burn something and see what color it made. You know, that was the extent of the scientist that is Carrie Weaver. But for decades and decades, scientists have tried to discover what holds everything together. Some of you know a lot more about this than I do, but if you go down to the smallest, to the atom, you got these three particles there. You've got a proton, positive charge, electron, negative charge, and then there's the neutron, which is neutral. Electrons are swinging around wildly, but they're in the center, in the nucleus. They don't know why. They know why the proton and the electron stay together. They're opposite charges. They're drawn to each other. But why is the neutron there? And truthfully, scientists don't have any idea why they stay together. They have actually come up with a name for the force, though. They just call it the strong force. And the strong force is what holds it together. It's also actually referred to as colossus. That's the force that is holding it together. But it's not Colossus. It's actually Colossians 1:17. By him, all things hold together. At the center of everything, Jesus is holding it all together. Okay? If he lets go, it all flies apart. Man, Carrie, what would that look like? You want to know what that would look like? Go to the end of the book of Revelation, where it literally says that everything burns and melts. The elements melt. They dissolve. Do you know why they dissolve? Because Jesus lets go. Okay. If Jesus is the one before and behind and above and below and to the east and to the west, and he's everywhere around us, but he is also in the center of us and the center of everything, that's a little bit different thing than saying, I want to put Jesus first on my list, right? Because literally the whole world is revolving around him. But ask yourself this question, around what does your world revolve? What is at the center of your universe? What is at the center of your home, your work, your finances? What is at the center? Because it's not enough to have Jesus on your list, even at the top of your list. He wants to be in the middle of it. It's not enough for your faith to be important to you. It should be the driving force of everything you do. You can think of it this way. Jesus shouldn't be the seasoning. He should be the main ingredient. That's a different question than, is Jesus at the top of your priority list? Is Jesus in the middle of everything that you do? When we come to Christ, instantly in that moment, Jesus impacts everything. We start to look at everything differently. We look at our wife different. We look at our home. We look at our money. We look at everything differently when we come to Jesus. The question is that still the way we see everything? Do we see everything in light of the fact that Jesus is at the center of it all? Is our faith just an add-on, or is it the main ingredient to who we are, what we do, how we live, work, and play, how we treat others, how we lead our families, how we raise our children? Is Jesus at the center of it? It's not just where do you spend the biggest amount of your time, most of your time, money, and time and energy. It's why. What are you trying to do? We don't need to fix our priorities. We need to fix our aim. What is it that we're even trying to accomplish? Because you can have Jesus at the top of your list because you think that having God first on your priority list will allow you to accomplish everything that you have as a goal in your life. But does your goal and your aim align with God's? Verse 18 says this, He's also the head of the body of the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. Get this, so that He might come to have first place in everything. For God was pleased to have all His fullness dwell in Him, and through Him to reconcile everything to Himself, whether things on earth, things in heaven, by making peace through His blood shed on the cross. God's plan is for Jesus to be the center of everything. Everything pointing to Him. Everything giving glory to Him. That is God's plan. And so it's not enough to just say, I've got God first and then family and then whatever. It is everything that God has given me, everything He has entrusted me with, is all of that aimed at reconciling everything to Jesus. Because that's God's aim, for Jesus to be in the center. Is that our aim? His plan is for total reconciliation of everyone and everything to Jesus, all things to Himself, and He is accomplishing this through what Jesus did on the cross. Jesus is the creator of all. Jesus is without a doubt the smartest, most creative, most interesting person who ever lived. And we have to ask ourselves, is my life devoted to reconciling everything and everyone to Jesus? To God through Jesus? Is that what my aim is? Is that what my life is devoted to? That's a different question than how are your priorities? That's a different question than are you giving enough time to God? The question then becomes, are you giving all of it to Him? See, we battle with this. We do. Whenever we start to think about this. Some of you, when you start to think about like work-life balance and you start to think about how all that's going to play, some of you, your jobs at times cause you to not be able to be part of our Sunday morning worship gatherings. And like that eats at you. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to de-emphasize the importance of this gathering. God uses it to teach us and to lead us and to encourage us and prepare us and equip, all of those things. It's incredibly important. But if your mentality is that that's my Jesus time, then yeah, you're going to feel terrible when you miss. And you're going to feel disconnected. But when you start to realize that it's not just the time that you're at a church service or a church gathering or a small group, but it's all of your time that's for Him. And all of it aimed at this idea that I want to be a part of pointing everything back to Jesus. I have to keep Him at the center. Because when we come to Jesus, it's the most important thing in the world. But we don't always stay there. If you keep reading down in Colossians 1, verse 21 says this, once you were alienated, hostile in your minds, expressed in your evil actions. This is before you find Jesus. But now he's reconciled you by his physical body through his death to present you holy, faultless, and blameless before him, if indeed you remain grounded and steadfast in the faith and are not shifted away from the hope of the gospel. And it's that shift. That shift is the problem. The problem isn't that your priorities are out of whack. The problem is that you have shifted your mindset away from your need of Jesus. Ultimately, we come to Jesus with this, something that sounds like this. There is nothing I can do on my own to save me or fix me or make me right with God. I need Jesus. I need what Jesus did. I need the life he lived, the death he died. I need his resurrection. I need the new life. There's nothing I can do. But somewhere along the way, we shift away from that. We shift back to thinking that we can figure it out. Okay, Jesus, thank you for saving me. I've got it from here. Thank you that I don't have to go to hell and I get to go to heaven, but I've got all of this. And that's just not found anywhere in Scripture. All we see in Scripture is that God's goal is for Jesus to be at the center and the most important thing in all of the universe. So he has to be the most important thing in everything that we do. He wants to be first place in everything. But instead, we think we can balance it out. We can divide it out. And so we try to divide ourselves and our lives along these elusive lines to make sure we don't fail God and we don't fail home and we don't fail our boss. And apart from being lost in your sin, I can't think of anything more miserable than constantly trying to figure out, am I giving enough here and enough there? Am I giving enough to God? And it's not the life he wants us to live, because God doesn't want his fair share of your time or your money or your energy or your skills. He wants all of it. And it's okay for him to want all of it because he owns all of it and he made all of it and he has a plan and a purpose for all of it. And so he says, hey, listen, if I've given you time and I've given you money and I've given you relationships and whatever I've given you, I want all of that, and I want to be in the center of all of that, and I want to be the primary goal of what you're trying to accomplish with all of it. Quit trying to figure out how much to give me and just give me all of it. And that's a different question than, are my priorities right? Am I giving God enough time? Am I giving him enough say in my life? The question is, do you really believe that in every situation you find yourself in, that Jesus is infinitely smarter than you and that he knows better? That he knows best what to do with your life and what to do with your time. And that you can honor God with all of it, not just with an hour on Sunday. You can honor God with all of your money, not just with 10%. If your goal is to make Jesus the center of everything. God has a plan for everything, and that plan is just simply this: make Jesus first place, central to everything. And he intends for us to use our lives to glorify Jesus, and then Jesus will glorify the Father, and one day all men everywhere will believe it, and they will see it, and they will say it. So we have to keep Jesus at the center. We have to keep all eyes on him. He's not the first priority on our list. Entire life revolves around him. He calls the shots. He gets the glory in everything. Verse 27. God has given me the responsibility of serving his church by proclaiming his entire message to you. This message was kept secret for centuries and generations past, but now it's been revealed to God's people. For God wanted them to know that the riches and glory of Christ are for you Gentiles too. And this is the secret: Christ lives in you. This gives you assurance of sharing his glory. Here's the secret. Jesus is already at the center of all of it. He already is. He's already at the center of your very being. He holds you together. If you're a follower of Jesus, he already lives within you. He is already at the center of it all. The question is, do we acknowledge it? Do we yield to that? Or do we fight him for power and fight him for control? Or do we let him be central, first place in the center of our hearts and our minds and our homes and our work and our families and whatever else we have. You see, one day every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. One day everyone is going to acknowledge that Jesus is at the center of it all. But as followers of Jesus, we get let in on it early. He tells us the secret early. Hey, Jesus is already at the center of it all. And our lives look significantly different when we stop weighing priorities and start saying, how can I best make Jesus central in my relationships, in my work, in my finances? And from there, we could do a whole other series. How to keep Jesus central in your money. How to keep Jesus central in your home. Maybe, I think I'm going to write that down. That's a good idea. We'll do that some other time. But we start to get to ask the questions, because when I start talking about priorities, every one of us that have struggled with this, there is a priority that comes to mind that we think, I don't give enough there. How do I get that one right? Quit trying to move it up and down in the list and put Jesus in the middle of it.